And now we're going to move on and have Clovis join us. Clovis is going to, I think, along with Maddie, they're going to share a really great presentation reviewing some of the historic background of the upcoming Juneteenth. That will be happening on June 19th. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Clovis. Clovis, if you'd like to introduce yourself to us, we're really excited to hear what you have to say and learn how to continue to improve our racial justice awareness and allyship.
Thank you very much, Nicole. God bless you all. Good evening. I want to also say thank you to Max, Maddie, and Masada for the invitation to be here. It's kind of tough to follow all those extraordinary presentations. They were very, very well done. I wish I were in organizations that could do their presentations quite that well. I don't know if Maddie's going to actually join in with me. I did steal a lot of her information, but we didn't practice together. So I don't know if Maddie wants to. You want to do some slides, Maddie, or shall I just go ahead and jump in and
the floor is all yours, Clovis.
All righty. So I don't know, introduce myself. At this point, I kind of tell folks to Google me because it's kind of a lot of stuff over the last 43 years here in San Diego. Past president of the NAACP. Most of you probably have seen me or heard of me. Past president of the NAACP, I'm the co-chair for the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion working group for the San Diego Green New Deal Alliance. I am on the board of directors for the Alliance for African Assistance and the chair of the board for the Alliance Health Clinic. That's not the people who give away the thousands and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. That's the folks who actually provide services primarily to refugees at our own health clinic. A bunch of other stuff. I work for Grid Alternatives. That's probably relevant to this group of folks. And I want to thank you also for the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and feelings about Juneteenth. Maddie and Max, I know have seen this. I don't know if anybody else has seen this. And so I guess I should say, kind of brace yourselves a little bit for it. It's not maybe what you might be expecting. So without further ado, I'm going to see if I can do this share screen thing. If I can find the right screen to share. Let's see if this is it. That looks like it, but I want to make sure I get everything in here because there's a bunch of stuff I got to do with this. Okay, and if I blow this, Max is standing by to help. So I think you all are seeing a PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct?
Yep, you got it.
Right. So I am, among other things, okay, how do I get this off my screen? Get out of here. There you go. I am, among other things, a licensed Baptist preacher. I'll usually say Black Baptist preacher in the state of California. And so I like to start off with something spiritual. And there's a passage of scripture in Galatians 3:28 that says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one. And I'll stop reading there for those of you who may not have anything to do with that other guy, Jesus Christ. You'll see a couple of pictures of him at the end of this presentation. But for those of you who are, this is a reminder to us that we are all one. For the sake of this presentation, I thought it was interesting to start with this particular statement from Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Later on in the presentation, you'll hear from Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She is a student of Neely Fuller Jr. If you ever look him up, you won't find a lot of information about him. He kind of preceded the entire internet age and did not do a lot of publishing before that. But its statement is kind of definitive in my disposition and perspective. If you don't understand white supremacy, racism, everything that you do understand will only confuse you. So I'm going to blast through some of these. There's a lot of information. I'm going to blast through most of these slides. A lot of you already know the information. Where did that come from? Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, okay, we'll get rid of that. Let's don't do this again. And just highlight some things. And there's a couple of videos I'll share with you. What is Juneteenth? Well, I want to remind us all that freedom, quote unquote, given can be taken away. And you'll see some of that as we go through the presentations. Juneteenth, the 19th of June, of course, why not? The information I'm sharing with you is what I borrowed, took from Maddie that she shared with me. I've seen a lot of stuff on Juneteenth, of course, but I thought this was really prescient. So I decided to use some of it. You probably know that in 1865, well, I'll give you more information in a moment. So 1865, 2.5 years after President Lincoln ordered enslaved people's independence with the Emancipation Proclamation, and 2 months after the Confederate Army surrendered is when Juneteenth takes place. And there was a promise of 40 acres and a mule when slaves were emancipated. because there was a question, as you see in the bold, there was a question as to what freedom really meant for emancipated slaves. And we let folks know that without property, money, or an education, most of us did not have a clear or immediate path toward economic independence, which meant what? We would find ourselves back again under the hand of those we had just been rescued from. And it was actually a group of Black ministers in Savannah, Georgia, that let Granger and Williams and, William Sherman and Lincoln know the best way we can take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor. And this was a very useful thing to say and a very useful thing to do for a hot second. And then President Andrew Johnson, who had owned slaves and publicly shared his beliefs in white supremacy, overturned the order before the end of the year and returned the land to the slaveholders and traders who had originally owned it. And that traders word is very interesting when we think about January 6, 2021. And there's a lot more information. I like the one down here where it said the value of 40 acres and a mule for 40,000 freed slaves, which is how many folks they had actually calculated they would work with at that time, would have been about $640 billion today. And there were approximately 4 million enslaved people freed at the end of the Civil War. So what would that be in today's dollars? Not to mention interest, dividends, stock splits, and the value of what comes off the land, right? So the way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and to till it and turn and till it by our own labor. So that brings up Tulsa, Oklahoma. And I'm hoping that I can make this thing work. We shall see.
America has so many untold stories buried in history. About a year ago, I heard one of them from my friend Joe, who is a history teacher. And that story led me on a journey to the most rewarding and challenging project of my career. It transformed my life, and it changed my relationship with my son. It was a story of the worst incidents of racial violence in this country, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. Picture this. It is May 31st, 1921. Tulsa is the oil capital of the world. Train tracks run smack down the middle of the city. On one side are gleaming new office buildings, hotels, and opera house, all built by newly rich oilmen and developers, all white. On the other side of the tracks, just steps away, is Greenwood. Greenwood is an all-Black district of about 11,000 people. It is incredibly entrepreneurial and affluent. There are hundreds of businesses here, a hospital, banks, a library, 2 newspapers, 20 churches. It is so successful that Booker T. Washington nicknames its business district Black Wall Street. In less than 24 hours, it will all be gone. Thousands of white Tulsans will burn it to the ground and murder at least 300 residents. When I heard this story, I was stunned. I minored in American history, and I am a journalist, and I had never heard of the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. So I did what any journalist would do. I flew to Tulsa, and I asked questions of the keepers of this story.
So I think it's very interesting that she says that although she was a student of history, she did not know about the Tulsa race riots. But she did something. She went and learned more about them. And it's a very interesting video if you watch the rest of it. But what she said that caught my ear in this particular presentation was that thousands of white people came out to destroy Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the challenge I was faced with was, could they all have been Klansmen? Or were they just regular white folks? So what was it that made them murderers? on May 31st, 1921. And then she said something that I was not familiar with myself. I thought was very interesting when she mentioned what she said at 7:16. I didn't know this.
Burnt to the ground. After 16 hours, the Oklahoma National Guard finally arrives and they stop this madness. But then they round up every last remaining resident of Greenwood and they march them to an internment camp set up at the fairgrounds. The only way out is if a white employer comes to get you. And after you do get out, you are forced to wear a little green tag that says who you are, where you live, and where you work.
A little green tag. That caught my eye, caught my ear. Because when I went to the Holocaust Museum in Los Angeles, that was one of the most remarkable things that I remember seeing when I was there. That folks were tagged, but I had no idea that in American history, this had been used this way. So the subtitle for my presentation is actually A Legacy of Betrayal. What is wrong with white people? And I have white in quotes. My wife and I travel extensively when we visit many indigenous First Nation peoples around the world, around Americas, North and South, and visit many Caribbean islands and Australia. And everywhere we go, we hear the same story. Europeans, white people came to the land, made promises, and broke almost every one of them. So here's a list of things that have happened in the United States of America. The Constitution of the United States gave us the 3/5 Compromise in 1776. The expansion of the United States gave us the Missouri Compromise in 1820. At the end of slavery and the end of Reconstruction era gave us the Compromise of 1877 and the Black Codes and 100 years of Jim Crow. The passing of civil rights legislation in 1960 gave us BACI. For those who don't know who that is, you can look that up. The War on Drugs, Mass Incarceration, Proposition 209 and Proposition 187, which are unique to the state of California. The election of Barack Obama gave us Donald Trump. Now is the year of Black Lives Matter and George Floyd and the stark inequities exposed by COVID-19 pandemic. How long will it be before the good white folks get bored with Black folks again and go back to compromising with their white parents, children, brothers and sisters and neighbors? We already see that Senator Joe Manchin and others are siding with the congressional Republicans to stop Black folks from moving forward. Senator Sinema says the way to fix Congress is to change the behavior of the Republicans. But I ask her and I ask you, how are you going to do that? And overall, we know that lawmakers have introduced at the time that I was putting this together more than 389 restrictive bills in 48 of the 50 states in the 2021 legislative session to restrict voting rights. So it's an uphill climb. And there are some theories about why we're in the condition we're in. But FRANCES CRESS WELSING has one of the most unusual, and I cannot see my own screen now. So I don't know how I'm going to make this video run. There you go. Okay, let's see if we can make that work.
Well, the Cress theory was an attempt back in the late 1960s to explain what I thought is a Cress theory of color confrontation and racism, white supremacy. An attempt to, as a psychiatrist, as a Black psychiatrist, to understand, well, what exactly is this thing that we call racism, white supremacy? Looking at why do white people behave in the way that they do? You see, and concluding that it has to do, number one, with their minority status on the planet, their genetic recessive status, in that they could experience genetic annihilation, in that the overwhelming majority of people on the planet are Black, brown, red, and yellow, and whites constitute fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet.
One of the things that we find that is happening now is there's this constant countdown you see on the news all the time to when America's a majority minority nation. So there's still this countdown happening in terms of when white folks will be in the minority.
There will be a majority minority, which is nonsensical. There will be a white minority if the non-white, if the Black, brown, red, and yellow people I hear they will be the majority and whites will be the minority. You see, and it's a illogical statement to talk about a majority minority. I mean, which is like white supremacy. I still have to put myself on top. I have to pose that I am genetically superior to compensate. I say it's a compensation for a genetic recessive status. Well, I think I was the first person to talk about white genetic annihilation in those terms, and that racism is ultimately a total system for white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on a planet that has the genetics and the demographics that exist on third planet from the sun, which is planet Earth. So I was the first to put it in those terms, and my thesis has not been refuted. I would say that if my definition is understood, that racism, white supremacy is the fear on the part of people who classify themselves as white about white genetic annihilation and the concern for white genetic survival. This would therefore mean logically and specifically that the focus has to be on Black males, because Black people have the greatest genetic potential to produce the Black pigment melanin, which gives off skin color. And since we have the greatest, the highest level of genetically determined ability to produce this pigment that can cause white genetic annihilation, and it's only males who can impose sexual intercourse. And so the focus consciously, subconsciously has to zero in on the males. This is why I say that understanding, I'm not talking about institutional racism. I'm talking about a total system construct that develops out of certain patterns of thinking on the part of people who classify themselves as white relative to specific realities that exist on this planet. And so then once that is understood, that the fear of annihilation that takes to the focus on the male, the Black male person as being the number one perceived threat, the number one enemy, and everything flows from that.
I hope you find that interesting. I suspect that the vast majority of you have never heard of that. But it's an interesting point of view. And I kind of finished this with saying everything bad white people did to Black and brown and Native people was done while good white people failed to stop them. Black folks and a lot of other folks are tired of being compromised just so good white folks can help bad white folks hold on to power. The two pictures you see on the bottom, the one on the left is the traditional image of Jesus Christ, but the one on the right is the anthropological picture of what Jesus would look like if he were a first century Palestinian Jew. So as a Baptist preacher, I just kind of put that in there for emphasis. And finally, the question is, what will you do differently? The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, according to Edmund Burke. And you all have the choice to do something different. And the climate statement that you have, the justice statement you have on your website is excellent and very good stuff. Keep doing that. But the thing that this whole presentation is designed to do is to encourage you to think differently, think outside the box, and most importantly, unlike generations before you, please finish the work. Thank you very much. And I think that will be the end of my presentation because we're out of time anyways. And I guess this is the questions time if there's time for questions. I see a question in the chat. Is the work ever finished? Wow. So my answer to that question is this. So I created a company called Omnilog World Enterprises, and the Omnilog statement is, the earth is a single community and its people a single family. Every scientific discipline and faith system articulate this truth. The Omnilog vision is one of a global community prospering and developing in unity by promoting peace, harmony, and cooperation through a better understanding of ourselves, each other, the universe, the world, and the communities in which we live. There is an ideal place that we want to get to, and when we envision that and we work and actually bring that into creation, then yeah, then the work is done. Now, will it ever be completely done? As long as human beings have what we call heruset, and based on the image you see behind me, as long as we have good and evil in the world, as long as there's evil in the world, and until, as we Christians like to say, until Christ comes back and imposes justice on everybody, then yeah, there's always going to be some challenges. But we can get to a place that is much more harmonious, much more loving, much more kind than the place we are now. And at least, at the very least, we can make the work a whole lot easier. I don't see any other questions, but feel free to ask if there's time. Did I warn folks this might not be comfortable before? I usually do that before I start.
Clovis, this is definitely a very eye-opening and inspiring presentation here. Just wondering if there's anyone here who wants to get involved. What are some like starter steps people can take? Obviously, educating yourself, listening to people like you speak, but what are kind of like the first steps that you might recommend for someone who just wants to start, creating some awareness and making an impact in this area?
Well, I would say two things immediately. One, begin to challenge every single one of your assumptions. And two, be prepared that it's not going to be comfortable. It's not going to be fun, right? We all like to think, we all like to think that we're going to be involved and engaged in an enterprise that's going to bring about change, and it's going to be rooted and based in the information that we previously received. Right, that we can do this legislatively, that we can organize and things of that nature. But every kind of change of this nature has been a violent one. We look at Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter, Black people, especially children, and not just Black people, but a lot of other folks didn't hit the street just because we were feeling uncomfortable. We were hit the street because we were being murdered by the very police people who have on the side of their car to protect and to serve. And we knew that wasn't happening to us. So these assumptions have to be challenged, that what we think is good is okay. From the position of a Baptist preacher, right? If I situate myself squarely and deeply in the Bible, you know what I don't find in the Bible? I don't find capitalism in the Bible. You know what I don't find in the Bible? I don't find democracy in the Bible. In fact, God told them, don't do it or you'll regret it. God said, I'm your king. Just stick with me. I got you covered. But we decided we had to do things our own way. And now we see the outcomes of those kinds of things. The second piece is that when we look at the changes that have taken place, again, it's been. Let me back up. So we need to question and challenge our assumptions, right? So capitalism, right? And Trump has tried his hardest to destroy capitalism. We don't know if he's done it yet or not, right? Because he had 4 years to pack courts. He had 4 years to change administrative agencies, right? We're just finding out that the Department of Justice, Department of what? Department of Justice, right? Department of what, right? The President and the Department of Justice of the United States of America is doing all these unjust things. You may not agree with I think it's Ilhan Omar, right? But she pointed out that the United States of America has been one of the greatest terrorist organizations the face of the earth has ever seen. Well, who else has ever dropped an atomic bomb on anybody, right? So we have to challenge those assumptions. But we have to remember that the Bible also says the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And so whenever we find systems in place that kill, steal, and destroy, prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex, a whole lot of American foreign policy, police departments. From my perspective as a Baptist preacher, and I have a whole lot of other stuff behind that because this picture behind me also informs my spirituality and my religion, we know that these systems were put together on the fundamental principle of negative energy, to put it that way, if we want to do something kind of generic. And if they are not challenged and questioned, then we are complicit in what they do. And it is designed, it's intelligent, it's designed to keep us comfortable. Those of you who are Christians also may have heard of a book called The Screw Tape Letters, and I'm trying to think of the very famous guy who wrote it. I have a copy of it. I can't think of his name, but he's very well known in Christian circles. And there's a phrase in that book.
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis. And there's a part of the book where, I'm trying to be very brief with this, there's a little junior demon here on earth who's being coached by his uncle, a very senior demon. And the only responsibility this junior demon has is to destroy the life of this one guy. And he's trying everything to do it, but the guy joins the church, he becomes Christian, becomes saved. And so he tells him, yeah, you're gonna pay for this, right? The older guy, the big guy tells the little guy, you're gonna pay for this because he was not supposed to become a Christian. Then he tells him, well, then what do I do now? He says, well, here's what you do now. Keep him in the gray area, make him comfortable. He goes to church, he pays his tithes, he prays, right? But does he ever do anything real in the name of Jesus Christ. And we have this phrase, in Jesus' name, that we like to throw at the end of our prayers, but that's not what it means if you ever exegete the part of the Bible that talks about that. If I were to work for Xerox, I can't sell stuff from another company. I can't walk in with a Xerox badge on my name and sell stuff from, I can't even think of the names of them, right? I do my stuff in the name of Xerox. And so I represent them, I do their contracts, I follow their rules and regulations. So when we say we do stuff in Jesus' name, we're supposed to be doing his stuff, right? So if we're sitting still, if we're comfortable, the probability is that we're not doing his stuff. So if we're comfortable in our social justice work, if we're comfortable in our racial justice work, even if we're comfortable in our environmental justice work, it probably means we're not pushing hard enough, because when you push hard enough to actually make change, evil pushes back, and it pushes back very hard. I'll stop there.
So, Clovis, do you think capitalism, you mentioned a little bit about capitalism, do you think it can evolve? Do you think Christ consciousness and environmental values and social justice can get integrated into capitalism? Well,
capitalism is a good word to use. We don't really have that here, right? If we had pure capitalism, then the government would never give a corporation a dollar, right? There would really wouldn't even be taxes if we have pure capitalism. So we don't have pure capitalism. Yes, capitalism can be adjusted to be just. I believe that. It's never been done. We've never seen it in the modern era, but I believe it can be done. But again, the only way it can be done is if the good folks get in the way of bad folks, right? If all of us are stockholders and we have stock in Tesla, we ain't mad at Elon Musk that he got a $1 billion yacht, right? Because he's making money for us too, right? Mm-hmm. So, and we can talk about disinvesting and all that kind of thing, but as Frances Cress Welsing said, the entire system, right? Steal, kill, destroy. We can talk about the last economic crisis based on theft. And the guys who did it got away with it. And we can talk about what just happened in COVID, where poor folks are getting poor, losing their jobs, 10 million people, 20 million people out of work, while the folks who are in the stock market are getting richer and richer. We made more billionaires in the last year than we've ever done before. So it's very, very deeply integrated into the systems. So yeah, it can be adjusted, but wow, man, you're talking about a heavy lift, but it's going to be. And you see what happens whenever we try to, what was the Occupy movement? Where's that at now? Right, so it's very difficult. We launched, I think, the most sophisticated and intelligent campaign I've ever seen against San Diego Gas and Electric, and they still won. So it's hard work.
Yeah, I hear you. I'll just add one thing. You know, there was some recent news where shareholders organizing and using the power of their ownership in corporations, they were able to get 4 new directors on the board of Exxon. Yep. And just getting people aware. So it seems like as one of many tools, it's like there's a million things we can do, but as one, voting with our dollars, investing consciously with our dollars, so that we invest in and we buy from the companies that are part of the solution, can be one step to move forward.
Yep, someone said, Maria said earlier, a multi-pronged approach. Yeah, it's got to be comprehensive. If you ever look at what Lily Fuller Foley wrote, and you look through the stuff that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing put out, you'll see that it is very comprehensive. There's 9 areas that they talk about working, and I'm not going to list them here because I don't remember them all offhand. But everything that happens in the world has to be addressed, right? Every aspect of our lives has to be addressed. We have to recognize that when the United States of America was founded, it already had 250 years of the history of they already had 250 years of enslaving. Was it 150? I forget the numbers. 1619 to 1776, so 150 years of enslavement when they wrote the Constitution. And they chose, it's not like, oh, this is something new, I've never seen this before. What are we gonna do with the slavery thing? 150 years of experience with slavery, and they still decided to keep the slaves as slaves. They compromised. And it's the compromise that kills.
I see.
Thank you, Senator Manchin and Senator, what's her name? Seneca? Yeah. Right? It's the compromise that kills. So I got 48 states that are trying to take my voting rights away, and I got 2 senators that are making sure that doesn't happen. In the interest of bipartisanship, from a man who has said, I'm not, you saw what I did to Obama. I intend to do the same thing to Biden. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to let him get any Supreme Court people. I'm not going to let him do anything. So I'm very interested. It's early. It's only June. Only been 3 months, 4 months. But it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they can move the Republicans and get some significant legislation done for the least of these. I think I've taken too much of your time, but I'm available because, you know, I'm a Baptist preacher. I could talk all day long.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you,
God
Clovis.
bless you.
Thank you, Clovis.
My pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Clovis. I was gonna say you are a phenomenal speaker. I'm sure so much of us on the call were just really riveted by what you were sharing, and we're really thankful for you coming to this space tonight and having this really essential conversation with us. And I really think that your line that compromise kills, like we need to remember that. And I'm so grateful for this conversation because it really reinforces the urgency for us to act, not just to educate and not just to be in an uncomfortable space, but for us to act. And as you mentioned, sometimes action it can lead to violence because sometimes that's all that there is to make the change happen. And I'm of course not advocating that we necessarily do that, but I think it's very important to think about in our attempt to navigate this space. So thank you, really, Clovis, so much.
Namaste.
Sure.